Hello, welcome back. We are continuing Dream Children by Charles Lamb. Hope you all got the textbook or refer to the PDF I have shared in the last class. Listen carefully. Children love to listen to stories about their elders when they were children, to stretch their imagination to the conception of a traditionary great uncle or grandame whom they never saw. It was in this spirit that my little ones crept about me the other evening to hear about their great grandmother Field, who lived in a great house in Norfolk, 100 times bigger than that in which they and Papa lived, which had been the scene, so at least it was generally believed in that part of the country, of the tragic incidents that they had lately become familiar with from the ballad of the children in the wood. See, the paragraph opens with a sentence, open with a sentence which says that children love to listen to stories about their elders when they were children. Charles Lamb means that children love to listen to stories about their elders when the elders were children. And the children also like to stretch their imagination, extend their imagination to a concept, to the conception of a traditionary, that is old-fashioned great uncle or grandmother. Grandame is an old word for grandmother, whom they never saw. So children would like to imagine an old-fashioned uncle or grandmother whom they never saw. So it was in this spirit that that is their little ones, the imaginary children of Charles Lamb, came to him one day to and asked about great grandmother Field, who lived in a great house in Norfolk. The Norfolk is a place in England, and great grandmother Field was a caretaker in that house. And the real owner, she was not the real owner, she was only a caretaker. The real owners were they lived in a nearby town, and grandmother Field took care of the house. And as far as the children were concerned, the house was 100 times bigger than the house in which Charles Lamb and the Charles Lamb and them lived. That's and this particular part of the world, that is Norfolk, it had been the scene of a great tragedy happened some years ago, and this tragedy is faithfully recorded in a ballad, that is uh, a song which tells a story which is named Children of the Wood. A ballad of the Children of the Wood tells the story of two children killed by their own uncle for their inheritance. Now there is an expression in English, children of the wood or babes in the wood, which came from this ballad. The expression means inexperienced innocence falling into a dangerous situation. Certain it is that the whole story of the children and their cruel uncle was to be seen fairly carved out in wood upon the chimney-piece of the great hall. The whole story down to the robin redbreasts, till a foolish rich person, pulled it down to set up a marble one of modern invention in its stead, with no story upon it. Here, Alice put out one of her dear mother's looks, too tender to be called upbraiding. What was the tragic events? mm, what was the tragic event that happened in Norfolk? The story of the children and their cruel uncle was carved in the chimney of the great hall of the house, and the whole story uh, down to Robin Redbreast. Robin Redbreast is an ancient legend about this bird called Robin Redbreast, which has got a red chest. It is said that, according to the legend, the bird plucked a thorn from Jesus Christ's forehead, and a drop of blood fell on the bird's chest, turning it red. And both of these legends were inscribed or carved in the wood upon the chimney of the great hall of this particular house. And after a while, a foolish rich person who owned the house, he pulled it down, he took it away, and replaced it with a marble of modern invention, a modern marble with no story or carvings upon it. And it seemed to be a very foolish decision to take away the antique and very beautiful inscription carvings and instead placing a modern marble there. And listening to this fact, Alice, one of the children, she felt angry, or she had an expression of scolding on her face, which resembled that of her dear mother, and that expression was too tender to be called, too gentle to be called upbraiding. Upbraiding means scolding. Then I went on to say how religious and how good their great grandmother Field was, how beloved and respected by everybody, though she was not indeed the mistress of this great house, but had only the charge of it. And yet, in some respects, she might be said to be the mistress of it too, committed to her by the owner, who preferred living in a new and more fashionable mansion which he had purchased somewhere in the adjoining county. But still she lived in it in a manner as if it had been her own, and kept up the dignity of the great house in a sort while she lived, which afterwards came to decay, and was nearly pulled down, and all its ornaments stripped and carried away to the owner's other house, where they were set up, and looked as awkward as if someone were to carry away the old tombs they had lately seen in the abbey and stick them up in Lady C's tawdry gilt drawing room. Here John smiled as much as to say that that would be foolish indeed. This paragraph tells how Charles Lamb explained to the children that Grandmother Field was a very religious woman, and she was loved and respected by everybody around her. And though she looked like the real owner of the great house, she was not. She only had the charge of it, and the house was committed to her by the owner of the house, who preferred not living there. Instead, he bought a new and fashionable mansion somewhere in the neighborhood, and but she lived as if she owned it, and she kept the dignity of the house in which she lived. The house later began to decay, and it was nearly pulled down, it was nearly destroyed, and its antique equipments, ornaments, etc., were stripped, taken out, and carried away to the owner's other new house, the fashionable house. And all these things were taken and replaced at the new house. And author Charles Lamb compares this process to carrying away the tombs of Westminster Abbey of London and placing it in the drawing room of a fashionable rich lady. Uh, and it seemed very uh, unsuitable to take the old ornaments and antiques and place it in a very modern background. And it was really a very foolish decision. And when Charles Lamb explained these facts to the children, one of the children, John, smiled and said, as if to say that that would be foolish indeed. That is, it was really a very foolish decision to destroy the house and replace the ancient equipments. Then I told how, when she came to die, her funeral was attended by a concourse of all the poor and some of the gentry too of the neighborhood for many miles round, to show their respect for her memory, because she had been such a good and religious woman. So good indeed that she knew all the Psaltery by heart, ay, and a great part of the Testament besides. Here little Alice spread her hands. Then I told what a tall, upright, graceful person their great grandmother Field once was, and how in her youth she was esteemed the best dancer. Here Alice's little right foot played an involuntary movement, till, upon my looking grave, it desisted. The best dancer, I was saying, in the county, till a cruel disease called a cancer came and bowed her down with pain. But it could never bend her good spirits, or make them stoop, but they were still upright, because she was so good and religious. And Charles Lamb then goes on to explain to the children how Grandmother Field died. When she died, her funeral was attended by a large group of people. Among them, there were poor people and rich people too. And these people came from many miles round the neighborhood to show respect for Grandmother Field, to show respect for her memory. And this all happened because Charles Lamb says because she was a very good and religious woman, and she was so good, and she knew all the psalms, psaltery, psalms in Bible by heart, and many part, a greater part of the Bible Testament also by heart. And when Lamb told the children about how religious she was, how she knew the Bible by heart. The little Alice, one of the children, spread her hands in prayer as if she is praying. Then Lamb went on to describe how upright, how straightforward, how graceful a person great grandmother Field once was. And she was in her youth a great, a respected dancer, the best dancer in that part of the village. And when Lamb tells the children that grandmother Field was a great dancer, Alice's little right foot uh, moved as if in a dance, quite involuntarily, without her knowledge, trying to imitate grandmother Field. And when Alice saw that Lamb was serious, she controlled it, And he continued the story. Grandmother Field was considered as the best dancer in the county, in the village, and till a cruel disease overpowered her. She had cancer, and though cancer uh, conquered her body, uh, it could never bend her good spirits. It could never make them stoop. And she always remained straightforward, upright, and she always remained good and religious.